For nearly 2 millennia, Greece's most sacred ritual forced initiates to confront darkness and symbolic death. Those who completed it lost their fear. The alchemists devoted generations to the same principle. The Stoics built an empire on it. In the last 100 years, we relabeled that process as disorder and built a $50 billion a year industry to convince you that discomfort is the problem. The pattern running your life follows a circuit installed before you turn 10. You obey an alarm a child programmed. Every time you obey, the relief reinforces the pattern, and the voice that would say, "Face it," goes quieter. Your parents carried the same circuit. Their parents, the same. And the information that would break this cycle was reclassified as superstition by the generation that profits most from your ignorance of it.
A boy grew up on a farm with no electricity in the countryside of Sao Paulo, Brazil. No phone, no television, no reference whatsoever of what the world offered beyond that horizon of red dirt and manual labor. His father prepared him the only way he knew: absolute discipline and the expectation that every obligation be fulfilled before any request. The world looked at that boy and saw limitation, someone who should accept the place he was given and be grateful for the little he had. Any rational bet would say that life would end within 100 kilometers of where it started. That boy faced bankruptcies, fraud from people who should have protected him, relationships that crumbled under the weight of mutual illusions, family illnesses that ripped the ground from under his feet when he needed firmness the most. Every time the world confirmed the verdict, he started over, from absolute zero, in countries that weren't his, performing tasks that would make any proud ego quit in the first week. His name is Renaato Ferreira. From that dusty plot in Brazil, he built an international logistics operation headquartered in Los Angeles and a tower bearing his own name in Uruguay. Not despite the chaos, through it. Each financial ruin was a surgical demolition of something that needed to collapse. Each broken alliance removed a mask he didn't even know he was wearing. Each health crisis forced a stop that ambition would never voluntarily allow. What if the same thing is happening to you right now? What if your pain isn't an accident in an indifferent universe, but exact coordinates on a map you haven't yet learned to read? What happens when you discover that the architect of your own chaos has always been you, and that this is the best news you've ever received in your life? The comfortable lie you carry is that your suffering has no blueprint. It does, and the architecture is yours. Almost 2,000 years before any self-help book, the Greeks had already solved this equation. From 1600 BCE to 392 CE, the mysteries of Eleusis represented the most sacred ritual in ancient Greece. Initiates didn't receive a diploma or a welcome embrace. They endured prolonged fasting, complete darkness, symbolic confrontation with their own death. The drama represented the soul's descent into matter and its rebirths. Those who completed the process lost one thing: the fear of death. Medieval alchemists devoted generations to a single objective disguised as chemistry, transmuting lead into gold. The metaphor was never about metal. Lead was the dense ego, the raw material of the human personality still unworked. Gold was consciousness, purified by the fire of experience. The process demanded a word we avoid at all costs: destruction. Total destruction before any transmutation. The Roman Stoics embraced adversity as an instrument of training. Marcus Aurelius governed an empire and wrote in his journal that the obstacle in the path was the path itself. He meant it as an operational principle that sustained decisions in real wars. 2,000 years later, we dismantled that understanding. We took the same experience that entire civilizations treated as a sacred portal and relabeled it a disorder. What was initiation became a clinical label. What was alchemical fire became an episode. The same pain that for millennia produced masters now produces patients. The structure of the modern world removed the context that made suffering intelligible and actively taught that this context never existed. The global self-development industry moves more than $50 billion a year, $50 billion invested in one promise: eliminate discomfort, optimize emotional performance. Deliver an improved version of you without passing through the fire that every previous tradition demanded. The market grows nearly 10% per year. Forecast 90 billion by the end of the next decade. Toxic positivity, the social pressure to maintain a positive posture in the face of any circumstance, turning every difficult emotion into a defect to be corrected. Compare that with Japan. The art of kintsugi consists of repairing broken ceramics with liquid gold. The piece doesn't return to its original state. It comes back more beautiful. The cracks aren't hidden, they're highlighted. The break is part of the design. On one side, a civilization that integrated fracture as philosophy. On the other, a billion-dollar industry promising that fracture is optional, that a shortcut exists between lead and gold that bypasses the fire. No ancient tradition that survived for centuries treated suffering as a factory defect. None. The Egyptians, the Greeks, the Hindus, the Buddhists, the Sufis, the Kabbalists. All of them built systems of evolution that demanded passage through darkness as a condition for accessing the light. The only civilization in history that decided pain is a system error is ours, and we are paying for it in the body. Stop playing the victim. You've heard that sentence. Maybe from someone close, maybe from your own internal dialogue, which tends to be crueler than any outside voice. The stomach tightens before the mind processes. A mute rage rises through the throat and gets stuck there, unnamed and unresolvable. What do? You agree, change the subject, move on with the protocol smile you learnt to use as a shield. Everyone suffers, get over it. 6 words that flatten everything you carry into statistical noise. When someone insists, when the advisor won't accept the smile and keeps pressing, something contracts inside and shuts down. The entire body communicates a message the mouth won't translate. If I open what I keep in here, no one in this room can handle what comes out. Most of the time, it passes. The next day pushes everything under the rug. Routine numbs. Work functions as acoustic insulation between you and what pulses underneath. But sometimes, in the dead of night, when silence is total and no distraction remains between you and yourself, the chaos returns, with an address, with terrifying accuracy. It knows exactly where it hurts because it was you, without realizing it, who drew the maps. And in that silence, the question you never formulate out loud appears uninvited. What if this pain is trying to tell me something I refuse to hear? The most repeated prejudice about people who operate on this frequency: escapism. People who can't handle reality and invent pretty vocabulary to justify running away. Refuting this requires one simple question: who is fleeing from reality, the one trying to numb it, or the one examining it until they find the structure behind it? Escape is consuming. Escape is filling every silence with noise, every void with a purchase, every pain with distraction. Someone who dives into their own shadow to understand the pattern generating the suffering isn't running. They're doing the work most people refuse to do because it hurts too much. Those who advanced furthest in this understanding didn't come out of retreats. They came out of bankruptcies, betrayals, starting over on foreign soil where nobody knew their name, nights when the ground vanished and there was no one to hold on to. They discovered these principles with dirty hands and a shattered ego. The battlefield was the teacher, not the theory. The story repeats in profiles no one would associate with this vocabulary. Engineers who rebuilt careers 3 times, mothers who raised children alone in foreign cities, immigrants who performed humiliating tasks for years until something inside them reorganized the reading of what they were living. None of them escaped reality. They all walked through it to the other side. External behavior never tells the full story. The person who looks stable might be on fear's autopilot. The person who looks lost might be in the middle of a necessary demolition. Something happens in the internal structure of those who walk through that fire and come out with a different reading of existence. Something that can't be explained by resilience or luck. To understand what, you need to go back to the point where everything cracked for the first time. Close your eyes for 3 seconds. Access a memory. The other one, the quiet one, the one you don't even classify as trauma because it seems too insignificant to deserve the weight of that word. Maybe it was a look, a father who turned away when you expected approval, a mother who compared you to the neighbor in a sentence tossed out at dinner, no malice, no intention. A teacher who read your answer out loud and the whole room laughed. You were 7, maybe 8. The event lasted seconds. What came after lasted decades. A child's ego doesn't process context, it processes verdict. In that instant, something engraved a sentence, "I am not enough," or "the world isn't safe," or "showing what I feel exposes me." The phrase varies, the mechanism is identical. From that point on, the mind operates like a search algorithm programmed by a wounded child. It doesn't look for truth, it looks for confirmation. Every result that validates the original fear rises in the ranking. Every result that contradicts it gets ignored, deleted, discarded as an exception. You've been living inside the results of that algorithm for 20, 30, 40 years, and you call it reality. We all do. A colleague who doesn't answer a message becomes rejection. A boss who corrects a report becomes humiliation. A partner who asks for space becomes abandonment. None of these readings match what happened. All of them match what was archived in childhood. The damage lives in the silent accumulation that comes after, never in the incident itself. The mind rewriting every new day with the ink of an old wound. One event contaminates the reading of all others. The more confirmations the filter finds, the more rigid it becomes. The more rigid, the less new information gets in. The seeds of the environment where you grew up defined that filter. The discipline that forged courage in some planted fear in others. The deprivation that taught resilience to some taught distrust to others. Same soil, opposite results. What mattered was always what the ego did with the event. You wake up on a Monday and feel something in your chest before opening your eyes. 3 work notifications on the screen. The filter activates. Before reading a single message, the body has already decided, danger. You respond with the minimum. Avoid the meeting that could have been an opportunity. Cancel lunch with the person who could have become a partner. Go home and tell yourself it was a productive day because nothing went wrong. Nothing went wrong. Nothing happened. We confuse the absence of problems with the presence of life. The following week, the pattern escalates. An invitation to an event. The alarm evaluates. Exposure, you invent an excuse. The next month, a proposal that would require moving to another city. The verdict, total risk. You analyze for weeks, find 17 reasons to refuse and 1 to accept. You refuse. What rises internally is a no older than consciousness itself, fired by the alarm that was programmed on that childhood night when everything cracked. The mechanism operates in 3 movements. First, the alarm. The amygdala fires a threat response at any scenario resembling the original wound. The body enters protection before the rational mind processes. tightness in the chest, tension in the shoulders, impulse to retreat. The ego reads it as intuition. It's programming. Second, the numbing. Every time you obey the alarm and avoid, the brain releases relief. The tension drops, the body relaxes, reward, the pattern reinforces itself. Avoidance becomes the path of least resistance, the route the nervous system elects as correct through repetition. Third, the erosion. The part of you that makes long-term decisions, that weighs consequences, and calculates the price of each accumulated refusal, goes quiet, silenced by the volume of the alarm. Each cycle of alarm avoidance relief weakens the voice that would say, "Face it." Over time, that voice disappears. Fear's autopilot, driving every choice. Now, put this in slow motion. The boss asks you to lead a new project. The alarm fires. You say you need to think. Thinking becomes postponing. Postponing becomes silence. The silence is read as disinterest. The project goes to someone else. Immediate relief, followed by a nameless void. The next week, you receive smaller tasks. You interpret it as demotion. The verdict confirms, "I knew it." The cycle closes. Every attempt to avoid the consequence created a worse consequence. Blueprint of unconscious chaos. You build the prison and call it protection. You draw the labyrinth and call it prudence. When this cycle runs long enough, the body gets sick, the mind contracts, the world shrinks to the size of the walls you built between yourself and life. But the alarm has a second expression. There's another profile that rarely recognizes itself in this conversation. People who don't run, they force. They work 18 hours and can't sit in silence for 5 minutes. They fill every second of the day with tasks, goals, calls, decisions. The packed calendar works as a shield against the same thing the other profile avoids, the encounter with the void. The easy label is workaholic. We admire this profile. We call it dedication, focus, discipline. What operates here is the same childhood alarm running through a different route. While the first profile responds to the alarm with flight, this one responds with control. Absolute control over every variable, every outcome, every person around them. If I master all the pieces, nothing catches me off guard. If nothing catches me off guard, I don't feel. The origin is the same. Events that destroyed the sense of control at a stage where control was synonymous with survival. The response was different. Instead of withdrawing, advancing. Instead of avoiding the world, taming it. In relationships, this profile demands constant presence, total devotion, millimetric reciprocity. When the partner fails to sustain these expectations, the frustration that surfaces isn't proportional to the event, it's proportional to the original wound. The reaction lands with the same intensity. The trap of control is that it works, until it stops working. An unexpected diagnosis, a layoff, a partner who leaves. When the variable that escapes is big enough, the entire system collapses. The fall of someone who controlled everything is more violent than the fall of someone already on the ground, because their entire identity was built on the premise that dominance was possible. Two profiles, two expressions, same root, one protects through flight, the other through dominance. Both operate on the autopilot of a program installed before the age of 10. And beneath both, beneath the flight and the dominance, a question neither profile dares to ask. Go back to the starting point with different eyes. A man every reasonable prediction wrote off, who lost everything, was deceived by those closest to him, and rebuilt from nothing on ground he had no claim to. The verdict was unanimous: failure. The final result disproved the entire verdict. What happened between the judgment and the outcome? The conventional reading says, luck, stubbornness, favorable circumstances. The reading that cuts across millennia says something else. The Kybalion, a text attributed to Hermes Trismegistus, opens with a principle that has survived every era: the all is mind. The universe is mental. The physical world operates as a projection of an internal state. Change the state, the projection changes. The second principle is correspondence. As above, so below. What organizes itself in consciousness replicates in matter. What remains as inner chaos manifests as outer chaos. The reflection doesn't judge and doesn't punish, it only shows. When you understand this in your body, and not just in theory, the experience of playing the victim role becomes unbearable. Every social interaction demands maintaining a version of you that doesn't match what pulses inside. The energetic cost is immense. You leave a 10-minute conversation feeling like you carried cement for hours. The conversation was easy. The performance of pretending drained everything. The capacity to create exists in everyone. It operates under a different economy. Whoever vibrates at the frequency of fear collapses realities compatible with fear. Whoever vibrates at the frequency of guilt attracts scenarios that confirm the guilt. The field responds to the signal. It always has. The suffering of these people isn't psychological, it's architectural. The building they constructed inside determines what materializes outside. The invisible tragedy, carrying the key and never using it because the cost of turning it is abandoning the identity the ego assembled over decades. There is an exact moment where choice becomes identity. The crossing is silent. Nobody notices when it happens. I am suffering is a verb. It describes a temporary state. It implies there's a before and an after. I am someone who suffers is a noun. It defines who you are. It eliminates the before and the after, locks the door and throws the key down the drain. Micro-decisions accumulate until they solidify. Every time you decline an invitation, because that's not my thing. Every time you dodge an opportunity, because that's not for people like me. Every time the internal dialogue repeats the same phrase with cosmetic variations. I'm like this. I've always been like this. There's no point in trying to change. The ego turns repetition into identity. And identity, once installed, defends itself tooth and nail against any evidence that contradicts it. The illusions that pain should have destroyed become the skin itself. The suffering that was fuel for transformation becomes a permanent address. The victim narrative crystallizes into personality. Leaving it starts to feel like leaving yourself. Who am I without my pain? The question terrifies because the answer is, I don't know, and the ego prefers a familiar hell to an unknown void. Obsessive control, compulsive escape, numbing through work, through consumption, through constant noise, all of it serves the same function. Keeping the identity intact, protecting the programming from any information that might invalidate it. Something in the last 2 decades accelerated this convergence. Friction disappeared. For centuries, the physical world imposed confrontation. You had to leave your house to work, to eat, to socialize, to exist. Every outing was a confrontation. Every interaction, an involuntary opportunity to test the filter against new information. The friction was uncomfortable and necessary, the only force that compelled the ego to negotiate with reality instead of dictating the terms alone. What happened over the last 2 decades was the systematic elimination of that friction. Food arrives at the door, work happens on a screen, relationships begin and end by text message. Entertainment fills every second of silence. Algorithms learn to deliver exactly the content that confirms what you already feel, think, and fear. Custom-built reality bubbles, each one perfectly calibrated, to keep the program running without opposition. The catalyst didn't create the pattern, it just removed every confrontation that forced consciousness to wake up. Without friction, the ego operates in a closed loop. Receives confirmation, generates more fear, seeks more confirmation. The cycle runs without interruption. The structures that forced confrontation turned out to be dispensable. Rites of passage, face-to-face conflict, immediate consequences, unfilled silence. Modern convenience paved the way for an existence where the ego never has to face itself. The world discovered that almost everything that forced people to grow could be eliminated, and it was. The individual carries the wound. The system keeps it open. There's a moment in almost every person's trajectory where the structure of socialization simply vanishes. School ends, college ends, the first job loses its novelty. And nothing replaces the question none of those institutions ever asked: who are you when nobody is watching? We were trained to obey, produce, and consume, never to investigate our own shadow. The system hands out diplomas, titles, and quarterly targets. It doesn't hand out tools for dealing with the void that shows up at 3 in the morning when every goal has been met and the void is still there. Media profits from victim narratives because emotional engagement generates clicks. Algorithms reward performed suffering because public vulnerability generates shares. Social media turned pain into social currency. The more articulate your collapse narrative, the more visibility you receive. The system rewards whoever performs the wound. Healing earns you silence. There's a concept that names what's missing: manufactured amnesia. We collectively forgot that pain was a technology of evolution. Civilizations that preserved initiation rituals, the Australian Aboriginals, the Andean peoples, the West African traditions, maintained a social container for pain. A space where suffering was read as passage, witnessed by the community, and integrated as part of the biography. Civilizations that eliminated those rituals left the individual alone with their pain, without context, without container, without witness. The problem isn't lack of information. There has never been this much information available about the human mind. What we redesigned was the meaning of suffering. And by removing the meaning, we removed the only thing that made pain bearable. The body registers first. Chronic cortisol hardens the shoulders. The jaw locks during sleep. Breathing turns shallow, trapped at the top of the chest, as if the diaphragm forgot it exists. The spine curves into the posture of someone bracing for a blow that never arrives, and has been bracing for decades. The tissues memorize what the mind swears it already overcame. Then, the temporal collapse. You wake up on Monday, blink, and it's Friday. The same internal conversation running for years without a single word changing. The world shrinks to the size of the narrative you repeat. The route shortens. Bed, desk, screen, bed. The people you spend time with narrow down to those who confirm the narrative. The ones who challenge it are pushed away, one by one, with airtight, rational justifications. Each reduction seems sensible in isolation. Accumulated, the livable territory becomes a hallway. Returning to the world of radical responsibility starts to feel like re-entering a dimension that is no longer yours. The air is different. The speed is different. The body that grew accustomed to contraction resists expansion as if it were a threat. The energy that should flow stagnates. Forcing results or fleeing from them burns the same reserve. Neither route generates real movement. Both burn fuel to keep the vehicle parked. There is a name for the advanced stage of this process: unconscious architect of repetition. Nobody works to get there. Nobody wakes up one morning and decides to build an entire life around their own wound. It happens one micro decision at a time, one refusal at a time. One numbing at a time, until the territory shrinks to the size of the loop and there is no longer any reference to what was left outside. The trajectory follows a predictable sequence, a crack that opened something, silent accumulation of confirmations. Identity crystallizing around the wound until any contradicting information gets discarded as exception, naivety, or provocation. The person spends years operating as a fragile character in a hostile world, the biological avatar mistaken for the player. The one who flees withdraws until the world fits inside a room. The one who controls expands until there is no space left for anyone else. Both routes arrive at the same coordinate, a vibrational economy of scarcity that life reflects back with total fidelity. Toxic positivity is the painkiller, the identity trap is the disease. The label the world offers is depression, anxiety, burnout. The missing name is the simplest one, forgetting what you are, the natural destination of anyone living in a world that erased the language of sacred pain and put nothing in its place. The most obvious argument against all of this, spiritual bypass, using frequency and vibration vocabulary to relativize real pain, blaming the victim for what they suffer, turning concrete injustice into a cosmic lesson. Look closer. Recognizing the blueprint intensifies the pain. It removes the anesthesia of randomness. It was bad luck protects. There is a pattern, and I participate in it, strips every excuse. The second reading demands more courage than the first, far more. Radical responsibility has nothing to do with guilt. Guilt looks backward and paralyzes. Responsibility acts on what comes next. Saying, I participate in the construction of my chaos means, within what happened to me, there is information I can use to break the cycle. The pain stays. The direction changes. People who adopted this reading kept suffering. What they lost was the purposelessness. The anger stayed. The grief stayed. The fear stayed. What shifted was the relationship with those forces, read now as signals from the wound still asking to be integrated. Grief is real, anger is functional, injustice weighs, and it should weigh. The blueprint transforms dead weight into ballast. A ship sails because of its ballast, never in spite of it. The most brutal reflection cuts the deepest. Every conflict shows the parts that still reject their own light. The partner who disappoints reveals the expectation the ego projected onto them. The question is always which reading of the event you choose, the one that locks the door or the one that hands you the key. The real choice has always been between the interpretation that imprisons and the one that returns the power to act. Renaato Ferreira, A Farm with No Electricity, Bankruptcies, Fraud, Illness, Starting over on continents that were not his. Now hold that sequence against everything this video has laid out. The bankruptcies demolished layers of ego that blocked what was trying to emerge. The betrayals cleared positions occupied by the wrong people in a structure being assembled without his knowledge. The illnesses forced stops that ambition would never choose. The wounds wrote the curriculum. The chaos was the construction site. The chaos was the project all along. Your suffering has a blueprint. You can keep living in it as a victim or read it as the architect you have always been. The pain is real. The scars are permanent. The fire burns for real. The difference between those consumed and those forged is not the intensity of the flame. It is the decision to look in the mirror, accept what it shows, integrate what was broken, and use the heat to forge a version of yourself the old ego would never have permitted. This understanding must liberate, never serve as a trap for the spiritual ego, an excuse to dismiss someone else's pain, or pretty vocabulary for feeling above those still bleeding. Mastery means transforming every scar into a map. Every tradition that survived millennia teaches the same thing. The river of consciousness cannot stay dammed. Holding back what you learned in the crossing betrays the purpose of the crossing. The overflow is the price of passage. The first step is silencing the filter long enough for the original frequency, the one that existed before the wounds, to become audible again. We developed audio tools calibrated for this function, slowing the alarm, restoring the connection between mind and field, opening the space where your consciousness operates as architect and not as victim of its own construction. To find out how to activate this portal and get immediate access, click the link on the screen or in the comments. If this video resonated with you, write in the comments, "It made sense to me,"